You're listening to Boggy Talk, faith conversations in the mud, a resource of Church on Bayshore.
Well, hello. Thanks for joining us today on Boggy Talk. Hope everybody's doing great. How are you guys?
Wonderful. Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, you sound like me.
I know. Yeah, no.
No purpose. Yeah.
I'm finally not coughing all the time.
Yes.
Oh, that's good.
So that I almost coughed. So it feels. I was sick.
Yeah.
You were
I was
sick.
pretty
You were coughing
sick.
for a
I was
while.
wheezing when I would walk far and stuff.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, dude. I mean,
Getting
I'm
older.
Here, enjoying the nice fall-ish, cool mornings weather. That's nice. I
think
hate
it's getting into the 40s this week.
I mean, I hate saying that simultaneously while the rest of Florida is recovering from
I know.
terrible weather.
Yeah.
But we enjoy the blessing here.
Yeah.
Right
Yeah,
now, so.
that's true.
Yeah, we are pre-recording this again, so we
Yes.
actually don't know the full extent of
but
hurricane damage
it's
again.
going to be bad, but we stand ready to help.
Yeah. Crazy. We've been talking about that for two, back to back to back. But yeah.
I was in a meeting where they were asking about how would Niceville deal with this because it's very hard to get out of Niceville, and they were saying a hurricane hitting here in July and August would be a nightmare because of how many people are
would
in
be
Odessa
here.
and
I
South
had not
Florida.
extra
thought about
people.
that. Yeah,
And it's hard to get out
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
because you see Saturdays, coming in and getting out.
Yeah.
So that would be an
yes,
absolute
it would be.
nightmare.
It absolutely would be.
Yeah.
I texted a friend who lives in Central Florida. He works at One More Child, and
Oh, cool.
just say, "Hey, I'm praying," because they have to prep all their campuses too.
Yeah.
And he's trying to, he's
Prep
a
his
dad.
house.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
a dad too, so he's got kids, and he was like, "Yeah, I would like to cancel my subscription to Hurricane of the Month because they just dealt with Helene
Basically,
there.
yeah.
And they're dealing with operations statewide, so it's it's crazy."
Wow. Well, I'm thankful for all of the groups and the relief teams that have been out there stepping up. They've been doing
Props
a
to
lot,
our disaster relief team. Yeah.
They're awesome.
They're so good.
Yeah.
They are.
And people are giving too, up until I think we're at $12,000 has been given, and so
That's
hopefully
awesome.
with the recovery that will increase,
Yes,
for
absolutely.
this hurricane.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Well, other events that we have coming up, I feel like we finish an event and then we're
It's
just
time for the next one.
right into the next
We're
one.
trying to fix that in 2025.
Getting
With our
better.
calendar.
Getting
We're
better.
getting better
Yeah.
for sure.
Well, it's good. I mean,
Yeah,
they're all
good things. Yeah,
they're
none
all
of them
really
are
good things.
bad. It's just which ones?
None of them are bad.
Yeah.
Different ratings, maybe.
Oh, sorry. I said yeah. I meant
You were thinking through,
I was thinking
like-
it's true. No, it's just
Yeah.
Prioritization.
Well, one event that we have coming up is our fall festival. I know we talked
Fall
about this
festival.
before, but we're still there. We definitely need more trunks for
Yeah, definitely more volunteers. Trunks, sign up online.
and
we need
candy.
more candy, lots of candy. The goal, our kids ministry team, they're the ones who organized the bulk of this, and they would love to see 1,400 people on campus that night. So
That'd be awesome.
That would be awesome.
So for somebody who might be thinking about doing this, parking their car there, how do they sign up?
They go to churchonbayshore.org/events. There's a registration form
Okay.
or sign up for trunks for some of the other stations. For
And so to
inflatables.
sign up for a trunk, they have to decorate their trunk?
They have
Yeah.
to
Yes.
decorate their trunk. Or I think our kids, they have some
Okay.
hey, if you don't have something, we can help you.
Okay.
kind of a
some
thing.
ideas.
Yeah.
Okay.
What if they have a lot of junk in the trunk?
They
You
got
knew
a
that
lot
was
of-
coming. You knew that was coming.
I could see
He was
it.
trying to find the
in your
opportunity.
eyes. I could see the look in your
we're
eyes.
we're getting
I
we're
knew.
getting
He
there.
was about to
When I'm about to
I
say
could
something
tell.
like that, Christy
Like,
Ross is
that
like,
is a leading question.
but then I kept you're like, maybe not, maybe.
I was like, should I say it? No, I'm gonna let, yeah.
That's hilarious.
So come if you have junk in the trunk
Yeah.
and park
Clean
your
out your
car.
junk.
Clean out your
Yes.
junk.
Just
in the trunk.
hide it, decorate it. All right.
Well, we're kind of sad, or I'm kind of sad, because we're wrapping up. Well, we wrapped up Jesus
Yes, we
Freaks
did.
this past
Sunday.
Sunday. So
yeah, we came back to the heart of worship.
We did.
yeah, it was a wonderful series. We'll still be in Colossians, but we finished
We
Colossians
will.
1 and 2.
3 and 4.
Okay.
Next.
Moving
Our
right
next.
along.
Yeah.
What were some of the major takeaways from the series for you guys?
I would say the first is that, man, we had a lot of comments about the throwback songs
They
to the
did.
90s,
Really?
and people were like, yeah.
Keep it going.
And so we'll have to keep doing some, I think, integrating it in. I think there's a lot of merit to that, just like there is merit for some of our more seasoned adults who, appreciate hearing a hymn, like we have to recognize part of it is like.
Wait, but one's in the Bible and one's not.
Right. Songs, hymns, and spiritual songs.
But you didn't do Big House, so you really
Oh,
failed
my gosh.
there.
Somebody
You
was
failed
pretty
there.
upset that we
No.
actually didn't do Jesus Freak. And I was like, well, it'd be more of a like spectacle if we did.
Yeah.
that.
It would be a spectacle.
Yeah. So, but I think it just goes.
Who's the
to
best
fact
rapper at Bayshore? Who do you think?
that,
I bet PT can rap.
he probably can.
Yeah.
Yeah. That'd be. Yeah. He probably
Can
can.
a little bit.
Yeah.
Me?
Yeah, didn't
Yeah,
you
a
do
little
that
bit.
on the
Yeah, a
Jesus
little
Freak?
bit.
If I do,
I don't
it
know
just
if I
kinda
do it in
comes
front
across-
of a few hundred people.
Yeah, it comes across not right when I do it. It's just not good.
I know. I'm reading
My voice
between
is
the
way
lines
too
there.
high. It's
I'm
just like,
reading between the lines.
Yeah, it's just not good. So,
Well, sorry, no.
I got rhythm,
rapping,
but you don't want me to rap.
Jeff
So-
Waits, maybe?
Jeff.
Jeff Waits? John
Let's ask
Corley?
him.
Man,
I bet John Corley could
we
rap.
should have a rap off here. I think this
Yeah.
is
a deacon rap off.
I like that.
Forget the deacon dip.
I'm about to
Let's
say,
do the
forget the
deacon
deacon
rap
history
off.
dip. We'll just have a rap. Man, we might have some people
Let's
show up
do
for
it.
that.
Put it on the calendar.
Junk
All
in the
right.
drunk and all.
Yeah. But I think it goes back, getting back to the point.
Yes.
Coming
Getting
back to
to the
what we were
heart
talking
of-
about.
Coming back to the heart of worship.
It really just shows like there is, and I think it's okay. Like there are powerful emotions tied to the songs we sing.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's part of how God created
Yeah.
us. So it's good.
You have Celine Dion songs. They have 90s
Like,
worship songs.
come on.
Yeah.
What was that one? The na 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 na.
No.
Yeah, just we had to bring that back.
That's right.
Yeah.
I thought there's another 90s worship song. It's like, na, 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 na.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
waves of mercy.
waves-
Waves of
well, yeah.
grace.
What is that
Everywhere
song?
I look, I see your face.
I have literally forgotten about that song.
Because
you did like the-
me. Oh yeah, that was a big motion song. Lots of emotions to that
I was
one.
like coming to faith, during
Yeah.
all
During
this.
that
So
time.
like it was, I was like absorbing all
everywhere,
that.
every
Every
move I
move
make,
I make,
make in you.
you make me move with Jesus. Yeah, that's
Every
almost
breath
like
I
rapping.
take, I breathe in you. Wow. And there was the like in the secret, in the quiet.
Yeah, I don't like that song.
Savage Garden. No, not Savage Garden. What was the name of that? Trading My Sorrows is the name of the
that's-
song.
That's
Oh.
Daryl. No, Trading My Stars is Daryl Evans. That's boom, 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 boom,
I'm
boom.
trading.
In the Secret, Sonic Garden.
Sonic Garden.
Sonic Flood. Sonic Flood. There you go.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just.
I don't
like-
know why I said Savage
that one's
Garden.
A little. That one's. a
That
little
was truly
touchy-feely.
Madly Deeply. It was a secular song. Yeah, I burned
Yeah.
that CD.
I'm like not a touchy-feely person, and which people would be like, "But you're a worship leader, aren't you?" I'm like, not really, but like that song in particular, it's like I want to know you, I want to touch you, I want to seek your face, I want to. I'm like,
It's a little weird.
Yeah, it's a little.
Yeah.
Draw
weird.
me close to you.
Yeah, that one's
I actually like that one.
that was fine, but like the other one.
That's what made like dudes not want to go
Yeah.
to church though.
Well,
Draw me close.
and
to
then,
you.
like,
They had a good
that-
chorus.
But that gave all that gave way to like stuff in the 2000s where it was like there's a Carrie Job one that was like I want to lean up against you and breathe, feel your heartbeat. It's like, do I? Like
Yeah.
that's a little weird. Like that was and,
Too far.
Yeah,
Too far.
I mean the
Yeah.
Psalms though.
yeah.
David was emo.
Yeah, that's true. But I think it's just like, but in corporate worship,
Yeah.
that's like a little weird.
Well,
Yeah.
kind of speak.
Anyway.
This transitions well to I think something that has been interesting through conversations I've had, and even some of the things you said on Boggy Talk, is people's conflicted feelings about that like season of Christianity.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Listen, there's a reason a lot of 40-year-olds are not in church who grew up in church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Because a lot of these things.
And some of these songs trigger like
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Really, I mean,
Yeah.
it's for real. And going back to like even Fall Festival, like I saw a meme this past week. It was like, Christians, we don't celebrate Halloween, and then it shows a picture of Fall Festival, trunk or treat, dress up as your favorite Bible
Oh, yeah.
character, and it's like
Counterculture. Yeah.
It's like this is our version of counterculture, but it's really more caricature culture,
Mm.
and I think that is a huge piece of it. Like,
Yeah,
I think
people can
those
kinda
kind
get
of things.
legalistic
So there is a lot
with
of
it.
confliction because there are meritorious things about these things in culture. Like we talked about purity culture when we first kicked off this. Like that was born out of a pure thing. Like, God's design for marriage, but then it got like convoluted and twisted and it became all about, well, not in every circle, but it came a lot more about women or girls and your purity, and guys or boys will be boys, and like it gets twisted into these things that they start off pure, and then because we mess them up,
Yeah.
we don't. So
Yeah. Obviously, how we get there is pretty nuanced, but
yeah,
Yeah, I think maybe this is getting kind of further in our conversation, but it's a lot easier to be like, hey, we can be distinct by doing a fall festival instead of letting our kids trick or treat, right? Then it's easier to do that than be like, hey, we got to be like Christ. You know, like,
Yeah. This is true.
yeah. So I think it's just so easy to fall into those kind of things, you know. And I think a true critique of Christians during that time, or probably any time, is like, you're not being different to be like Christ. You're being different and just being weird.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Like,
That's
Yeah.
so true. And I think, this one of the things about 90s, like there was a huge emphasis on like the end times. And this came up in our life group this past week as we're studying 2 Peter 3.
ooh, left behind?
Yeah, really, just kind of the concept of how like
Tribulation houses. They don't do those anymore.
Yeah, tribulation
Oh,
trails,
yeah, there was
judgment
a church that did
houses.
that,
That was the thing. And it was,
How do people get saved
they
now
literally were
without
like,
that?
and I remember seeing
It's called
one. It was
Hell's
like,
Fury. Remember
yes,
that?
and
You
it was
remember
like
Hell's Fury?
literally like.
That
It
sounds
was
like a
Hell's
ride
Fury
at the
will
fair.
scare the hell out of you. Like it was like the catchphrase,
No way.
like marketed to
Yes.
Christians. Like
I went to it. They actually would have.
Wait, this was here?
Yeah.
Oh,
there was
God.
one
Not
in Fort
thi-
Walton.
Oh,
Not at this church.
Oh.
Yeah, not
No.
not here.
Oh, okay.
No.
You grew up in Niceville. We're like, oh no, this was here. No.
I
in
would
Fort
not be
Walton.
surprised.
And they had like demons like come out in the audience
Oh,
and
wow.
grab people. Like it was people that they knew that it was happening, but they
Yeah,
had
okay.
the whole like Left Behind and then
Yeah.
that.
Wow.
No, I'm like, oh my
Crazy.
gosh!
Yeah.
But it was always around Halloween.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
Yeah, but like what you're saying, it's
Forgot
like it's
about
so
that.
much easier to get focused on like in 2 Peter 3, 2 Peter chapter 3, it's about the day of the Lord. And it's easy, like as he's talking about what it will be like, to get caught up in trying to guess when it is. When is the day of the Lord? And that's a huge thing. And really, it still is in some circles, but especially 80s, 90s. But
People in their 80s and 90s?
no, well, that too.
Okay.
Or in the
I don't think
decades.
they're like the day of the
They're
Lord's
like-
any day.
they're
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
it could
I'm
be
going
tomorrow, I'm
anyway.
good.
Yeah.
But like the whole point of him writing that comes later in that chapter when he says, so in light of these things,
Right.
as we are awaiting and hastening the day of the Lord,
Yeah.
how should we live? And I think that's what we focus on all these other things rather
Yeah.
than like Jesus. Based on all of this, that he's returning, how do we live? And I
Yeah.
think going back to the culture question, like those things become easier targets
Yeah.
than how do we actually follow
They
Jesus.
thought Jesus was coming back. Like the apostles, the disciples, the early church, they thought he was coming back in their lifetime. And so they lived differently. We just want to obsess about when he's coming back, keep living the same.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
and
true.
so
That's
I think
true.
it's interesting with like these tribulation houses. Again, I don't think anybody's really doing those except for maybe like independent fundamental Baptist, in Missouri or something. But I don't know why I said
Missouri.
Missouri. I don't know.
Sorry, Missouri
But
people.
That's where isn't that where
Arkansas.
Westboro Baptist is? No, they're in Kansas. They're in
I have no
Kansas.
idea.
They're in Kansas.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or no, they're in Kansas City, Missouri. I don't
It's
know
so
where they're at.
confusing. Why did they do that? Kansas City, Missouri? I don't
In
know.
Kansas City. Anyway,
Yeah.
but somebody be like, well, I know this one person that got saved because of that. And it's like, that's not justification to
Right,
do this
yeah.
huge thing that
Yeah,
sends
I mean,
everybody.
people get saved under like false
I know,
teachers
cults.
too.
Yeah.
Because yeah, exactly.
I know someone. This is not. Y'all gonna think I'm making this up. So, a person in our former church's testimony. Obviously, people had shared the gospel, but she was reading. I don't know which one because I haven't read them. One of the 50 Shades of Grey books, and in it, the girl has some kind of spiritual encounter with Christ, and it made her go to church.
Wow.
So
Wow.
we're like, well, people should read 50 Shades of Grey.
No.
I forgot
Yeah.
that even existed,
That's
but
okay.
yeah.
That's crazy.
And I mean,
That's
but that just
crazy.
shows the goodness of God in the
Yeah.
midst of our idiocracy, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
So
How crazy
not that
we
everybody
are.
who did Tribulation House was
No,
an idiot,
and
you know,
again, like I don't think the intent. I don't necessarily was how it came across or what it became.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and so
Yeah, it's so easy that we make it about things that it's not supposed
Right.
to be about. And that's the constant struggle that we have. So going back to the good parts it's all good, Colossians 1 and 2. But really, I was reading over that again recently, and I'm like, this is a part you could just memorize. I mean, both of those chapters are just so strong and just great reminders to all of us of what is important and what, the truth that we need to constantly be leaning on. So this last Sunday, we talked about the heart of worship, which we kind of mentioned that earlier. And we're just constantly drifting to things that are not about Jesus. So why do we do that? Why does each culture kind of seem to do that?
It's a lot easier to not focus on Jesus, to make it about something else. It's, that's bottom line. How do we why? Our hearts are idol factories. And so we will constantly replace Jesus with anything that gives us a feeling of validation or preference. That's a simplistic answer.
Yeah, I think it's easier. I think we're in a culture. I think
culture's a big piece of
I don't
this.
think this is the same problem in cultures where Christianity isn't as prevalent, or at least as prosperous. I guess that's
we are prosperous, and so we have options. And so that helps us feeds into our preferences. I remember when we were in India one time, and the pastors were asking us about a situation in their church, and it was a matter of where they really needed to confront someone about an issue. And so we walked through what the Bible says about church discipline and how you confront someone. And they said, so this is what happens in America? And we were like, no, really what happens in America is people just leave to go to another church. And their expression was just what? There's not that option here. And so there's when there's more cost involved, you don't give as much weight to your own preferences. And I think that's a big piece of it.
Yeah, and I think it's easy for church leaders to be okay, well, who's our people? How do we keep this group of people happy, and how do we keep our lives secure? And there is that temptation, and so and it's really just easier to double down on this is our thing, we're gonna be
sure.
And especially if it's cultural, and the gospel, Jesus is our thing.
And we have to really be sure that we're doing that. And I think, in terms of worship, one of the things that we really tried to give language to in more, not necessarily, you've done it in sermons, we've done it on Sunday mornings, but it's happened in some smaller groups, as things have changed, we tried to help, meet with people and explain things, and really giving voice to, specifically for the worship service, what truly is preference, and that it's helping people understand that it's okay to have a preference. It is okay that you prefer a style, and that's fine. There's not, that's kind of neutral to have a preference, but to elevate your preference above the good of others, and to elevate your preference above the glory of Jesus is idolatry.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think we've come a really long way in our church, and that is not just about an older generation and hymns. That is also about a younger generation in modern music. It's both ways, and I think we've really, as a church, have taken great strides to help, and it's because of the leadership of a lot of our senior adults who've been able to do that encouragingly. And we were just planning worship for the next week, and I was meeting with PT, and one of the songs we're singing is "Oh, Praise the Name," and he was like, "Does the church know that?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, the church loves this." And I said, "In fact, you can sing that in the traditional service too, because they've sung it." And I was telling him, but one of our senior adults, we sang that on my first Good Friday here, and one of our
you sing that on your first Sunday, your first time here.
I think
Oh,
maybe
Praise the
so.
Name. You
Yeah,
did. I remember.
It was new, and it's we sang it at Good
was
Friday.
like,
Oh,
yes.
it's coming! Here's coming!
Yes, because you had the choir. I remember.
Yeah.
I was in the balcony for y'all's rehearsal.
And but we sang it at that Good Friday service, and that Good Friday service was a blend of our at that time traditional or blended service and contemporary service. And he came up to me, and this is a man in his 80s, and he said, I can't remember the person's name, but he said, so and so would have fell over in their grave if they saw me in worship tonight. And I was like, what? He's like, because I had my hand. It was the first time I've ever raised my hand in worship, and I couldn't help it. Now, raising your hand in worship isn't the telltale sign that you finally entered into the Shekinah glory of God and the Spirit. But here's a man in his 80s who's saying, this is not my preference, but I cannot help but worship Jesus. And it's with that kind of attitude that I think our church has been led by lay people who've just said, we love Jesus.
Yeah.
So I think
neat.
It's submitting one to another out of reverence to the Lord.
Yeah.
Usually the tension in any church is just what the majority wants, and if that preference, trying to navigate that preference, of the majority, and I think one thing that creates tension in a lot of churches is a pastor comes in and he has a vision of how he thinks things should be, or a group of leaders, and the church isn't there yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I think by God's grace, we've been pretty good, not perfect, but pretty good at being like, this is who we are. We're going to keep moving in this direction a little bit, but also we're not going to force our preference on you either. I think sometimes when we move in a direction, whatever that direction might be, people are like, oh, well, that's just, what James wants to do or Justin wants to do. And it's like, no, that's been, what the Lord has been doing and how he's been changing people's mind about a preference, and I think for us as a church, I can't speak for every church, but like we've really tried to keep it about the gospel, about Bible study, about serving the community, being focused on global missions, multiplying, and that's about it, and then we should be evangelistic. Like, so I may have said this on Boggy Talk already, but somebody actually commented to me the other day and was commenting on our church and says our church doesn't get focused on nonsense. And I was like, man, that's like one of the most complimentary things you could say. Now, sure. I'm not going to say everybody's little passion is nonsense, right? Yeah. But they were, we don't become very focused on people's specific things they're passionate about. It doesn't mean we don't believe they're valid. Like God might put, something on your heart, and I'm like, you need to figure out what to do with that. But be careful before you think everyone should be just the same, have the same equal passion. And so, like, I've had people who've come to our church. We'll take Israel, for example. I've had people come to our church, and they're like, I'm here because my church doesn't talk about Israel. And I'm like, I'm literally like, they're not going to stay, because they have something clear in mind. Yeah. And they do, and they often are combative about it. But then there's other people who really do have a heart for Israel in our church. And they have that heart for whatever reason the Lord gives them that. And they're not going to stop talking to me about that, but they also are humble and are they're talking to me because they believe the Lord has called them to talk to me about it, and they listen to what I have to say humbly about our approach. Those are different. Like, again, we have people in our church who they leave because they're, and again, I'm not because they're Reformed and they want to talk about the tulip. And then there are people in our church who, they might lean that way, but they get like that's their passionate theological stance is not what the church is going to focus on. Eschatological views. You brought that. There are people who are premillennial dispensationalists in our church, but they're not like, you got to talk about this, Pastor James. Yeah. I don't know what else.
Well, I think those are theological issues, and then you get into the ministry issues or ministries. There you go. And actually, this is fresh on my mind because we this morning went to benevolence ministry meeting, and we have great people who serve in a benevolence ministry, and they were saying, hey, we need more awareness. We need to make sure the church knows, and that's true. Like that's true. And they were asking for certain things. I said, well, that's. And also ESL wants that, and disaster relief wants that, and this ministry wants that, and OCC and it's right. And I said, like, you are doing what you should do in advocating for your ministry and people to be involved. And our job, and I said, I've got to meet with our communications team, and we got to figure this out. Our job is to figure out how do we do all of these things that are worth it and not overwhelm the church with 17 collection drives at the same time.
Right, absolutely.
Like we have to manage those tensions, and
our jobs sound really hard as we're talking about it right now. I love that.
There's so many tensions we manage. That's why we're like constantly like a ball of rubber bands. But some people will get frustrated that they feel like because we aren't only highlighting theirs or highlighting theirs above everyone else's, and not and our benevolence, for clarity. Our benevolence ministry is not this. Right. But some people do that. I mean, that happens in churches all the time. I mean, I've had people say, like, they cut a ministry at a specific church, and this person said, well, I'm called to serve that ministry, and if we're not doing that ministry, I'm leaving this church. I'm like, so you're called to serve, and it was a program, it was like a Bible study curriculum. You're called to teach that, but not to the church to make disciples.
Can I just guess that was Awana?
It was. It wasn't this church. It was not this church.
Sorry.
But it was. There's people, and
it's because it was developed in the 90s.
Yeah, I mean, it really is.
And all things from the 90s.
Yeah.
But it's like these beautiful things that if we're putting them in above like our agenda, we have to be so careful with that. Yes. And I think as leaders, that applies to us too.
Yeah.
Like we don't get what we want all the time, and that's good.
Yeah, and I think there's some leaders that just won't say no to strong personalities like that. And so let's take Awana, for example. Like, there's nothing wrong with that program. It's a great program. The Lord has used that program. But is that what this body should do? Like, that's not a decision that two people make, you know. Yeah. That's not a decision that the loudest voice should win, you know. Like, right. And it does. So when we come back to, like, these ideas, somebody's got an idea, we're going to do a tribulation house because my grandmother got saved, you know, going to a tribulation house. And it's like, you know, hey, we need to pray through if that's really the best this church should do. Yeah. Now, kind of going the other side is like, in some situations, they're not doing anything, you know, and so, like, okay, we're going to do, you know, D.L. Moody, right, said my method of evangelism works better than your no evangelism, you know, and so that's a valid argument on the other side. But I think, I think we have to recognize, you know, the centrality of the gospel, the centrality of making disciples, the centrality of teaching scripture as a part of that, centrality of serving our community, the centrality of being a church that cares about the nations. In my personal opinion, being a multiplying church as much as you can. And then the other things are negotiable.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
And like you guys said, that's definitely a tension that you have to manage, and it changes with people, you know, who's in leadership, and it changes with congregation members and all those things. And so that wisdom that you guys, we have to constantly be going back to the Lord, and, you know.
I just want to say thank you to you, and thank you to you, and thank you to Steve, and probably everyone on our staff, at least who's in a leadership role for sure, even though I'm thankful for everybody on our staff, but because you guys are involved in a lot of those conversations, and I feel like when it's me, it feels very final.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily final. We're not saying benevolence. We're not going to talk about you forever. Yeah. We're just saying, hey, right now, no. But, like, if they're pushing that with me, it feels like final. And so I feel like because we do have such a great staff, like, I'm not the one having to say no very often. We laugh. I'll be like, yeah, sure, you can do that. And Justin's like,
oh, great.
Nah, that's not going to happen.
I'm the guy who, like, naturally wants to say yes to everything. I'm like, yeah, of course. I'm like, no, I can't. For the sake of the health of our church, that's not good. So, no.
Yeah. I regularly say, like, I have no problem with that, but we got a lot going on, and, you know, you're going to have to talk to that ministry leader.
What are the logistics of it all? How does it break down? Yeah, that's good.
But our church, when I got here, the bulletin had like 93 announcements in it. Seriously, Kelly, I need to find one for you. I really need to find one for you.
I believe it.
And they would just, if somebody was like, I want to talk about this, regularly they would let them, like, well-intentioned, come and talk on Sunday morning.
Yeah.
You know, and then I got up and I was preaching 45 minutes every week, so we just couldn't do that anymore.
You didn't have any time.
I don't preach 45 minutes anymore, but yeah,
that it's difficult to manage, and, you know, you have to have wisdom in that and seek the Lord in it, and lots of counsel from lots of people. You know, none of us do this alone, and I'm grateful for a staff that everybody just works together and talks and communicates and does all of those things. So, speaking on things that churches deal with, vote on, don't vote on. So some of us have been in churches where voting on the budget is normal. Like, we have these in our cycles. But then there are some churches that they don't even vote on that at all. So why is that?
I guess the simplest answer is usually however the church is structured and their form of polity, church polity. So I can speak to why we do it that way. It's because of our church polity, and also, I mean, we really do value transparency with the church, and so, you know, there's every line, every account number is put out in our budget. This year, our stewardship team produced a document that shows comparison from 2024 to 2025 on every line item, which helps the church see, like, where priorities are, where they've shifted, what we've increased. And ultimately,
who we don't care about anymore.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's what the translation is.
Yeah.
But ultimately, and those budgets are the result of congregational input in our input meetings, and then the MLTs, budget area managers, some of our staff. And so there's a lot of hands in it when it's all said and done, and ultimately the church approves it because it is the church's budget. This is not the staff's budget. This isn't the pastor's budget. This is the church's budget. And I guess
it's the Lord's budget.
That's right. You get theological. I mean,
that's what Mark Hayes said.
That's right. It's the Lord's budget. This is God's budget, is what he said, and it's true. It all belongs to Him. And if you go back, the pastors of the church in Ephesians 3 are given to equip the saints for the work of ministry.
4, that's okay.
Do what?
Ephesians 4.
Ephesians 4. Yeah, that's right.
You're good.
13. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's what it is. And so we shouldn't be the ones say this is how it has to be. So it's church buy-in. Other churches have probably more of a, I wouldn't say pastor as dictator, but pastor as a final authority on everything. And so pastor said this, we're doing this kind of mentality, and maybe they don't vote on it because they don't want people to ask questions.
Yeah.
You can't say that for every church that does it with it, but I think that is probably the case in some.
Do people like that are new, discovered, do they ask you specifically about budget things at those type of meetings?
They did this past
week.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we talk about giving and we talk about the budget.
That's where question 2 actually is from.
We don't go specifically into like line by line detail at Discover, but we do provide a budget to them at Join, and people ask questions.
We provide a budget. Yeah, not a detailed budget, not a third line budget at Join, but
at Join we give it to them.
It's just a second line. It's just a bigger line budget. But I mean, really not adding anything to what he would say. I would just reinforce that it's polity. I think it's important to know your church's polity, and are you okay with that? There are churches that are definitely either led by the staff or led by the elders, and usually have some kind of finance team, and that's it. And they're not necessarily wrong. They're not necessarily wrong. I think every church has to vote on the budget. They just don't have to give a ton of detail if they don't want to. Like to be a nonprofit organization in Florida, I think you have to vote on the budget. Your members have to be able to vote on the budget. Or something like that. Yeah. I could be messing that up, so maybe I'm wrong.
Don't go call your church if they don't do that. Be like,
maybe it's just vote on the officers. I don't know, but there is something membership has the right to. But yeah, so that would be. I do think sometimes there's shadiness. Sometimes there's just lack of stewardship. I would also caution anyone who's in our church and who's going to move, because of military or wherever. I would not necessarily I would not compare your church with our church because. We are very blessed with a lot of very gifted leaders. So the reason they're able to give the level of detail, the level of transparency, is because we have a lot of very skilled people. Yeah, so I think there's probably other churches that desire to be as transparent.
Yeah.
They
That's
just
a good point.
Don't execute it as well in terms of transparency. That doesn't mean we're better than them. It just means for whatever reason the Lord has chosen to bless us in that regard, and we're able to do that very clearly. And now we're starting to have some longevity of staff, and so there's it's easier to communicate with our lay leaders, and so we're thankful for that.
Yeah, that makes sense. We did have a question during Discover about missionaries that we support. How do we decide we're going to support this person? I'm sure you have people that come to you.
Yeah, that's a great question.
And back to before, because he's going to answer this because he's a missions guy, but before, back to the whole which ministry we support and which theological issue we talk about. This is another one where somebody will be super passionate about a missions organization or a specific missionary.
Yeah, that's true.
And I'm not discounting that, but whether or not we as a church should support them and how much we should support them is a different.
I would say this is challenging because there's so many emotions tied up in this, because we as Christians, we want to support missions.
All the missions.
Yeah, all of them. And most of them are great. Not all of them are great. And so we have to also consider really is this a ministry or this person, are they aligned with what we would say our primary issues, etc.? So I would say ultimately we have a missions ministry team who makes these recommendations. And so there's a process through which, I would say oftentimes they get connected to, someone sends me information or sends someone on the MLT information. We'll have a conversation, and then they present to the missions MLT, and the missions MLT ask questions about what they do, how if they're not with IMB and how they're raising support, how are they currently raising support, where's their funding coming from, what are the measures of accountability you already have, what support, and we have an agreement that we give to missionaries that we're going to support. These are our expectations of what you should do, and vice
Post
versa.
Positive things about James at least once a week on social media.
Yeah. Church on Bayshore, and then also
that was a joke.
That's right. also what you should expect from us as a church, because we're not just sending you, we want to be your church. And so, and that's a short answer. Definitely can go into more detail. I would say one of the first steps is if they're not a church, if it's not a church member, if it's like a friend of someone, like someone, the first part of the conversation is, hey, we are a Southern Baptist church, and the first thing we'll do is say, hey, I want you to read our statement of faith, and I want you to read the Baptist Faith and Message, and just say, are there any areas in which you have variance? And that doesn't mean automatic no. It just means like we're not going to support someone who believes something outside of what we would consider orthodoxy. And we've had that happen where the organization they were sent with in their statement of faith talked about the second baptism of the Holy Spirit, and I was just like, what the work they're probably doing is great, and they're a Christian. Like that I don't believe they're not a Christian because they think that. Right. However, my personality is like, sure. But I'm like, but I also represent the church who's entrusted this to this team. And so like, that's probably a no. Yeah. Because of these, different beliefs and that. So
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Well, we are wrapping up this episode, and we're also wrapping up Jesus Freaks, but what's coming? What's going to be new?
What is new? Do you know, Kelly?
I do know.
Well, we're continuing Colossians.
Yes, which I'm very excited about. We are now going to be calling it. It's Look Up.
Look Up.
Look Up.
Yeah.
Look Up. There's a
the very first beginning, set your mind on the things above. And then he begins to talk about ways that plays itself out in our life. And so that's really the focus.
That's awesome.
Man, we need that. I need to set that's hard. I mean, because we just get so.
I feel the pressure.
We're constantly looking now. I mean, you better inspire me. There better be some tweetable statements in here.
Well, you said.
If the music doesn't give us the feels, I don't guarantee the tweetable statements.
Fire up the haze machines to bring the Holy Spirit fog.
Yes.
The haze machines. You had said something.
If you don't, you might get critiqued on concerns. Did you see that?
I did.
One of our friends' churches in town, somebody was like, why don't they have smoke machines anymore?
I was like,
really?
oh my gosh.
Concerned citizens in
Niceville?
We would get the other. Somebody would be like, I'm leaving Bayshore because they had smoke.
I was like, that's just so you can't win with it.
If you see smoke in our sanctuary, you probably need to run.
An alarm will be sounding soon.
It was not
in the 90s, it was the deacons. But now,
okay.
They weren't singing Matt Redman, but they were smoking in the parking lot.
Oh my gosh. Thought about that. Okay. Well, if you guys have any questions for us, especially after this episde, feel free to send them to Kelly, Kelly, at churchonbayshore.org. And thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for listening to Boggy Talk. We are so glad you joined in the conversation. Go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss a beat.